Well, it's interesting. I've probably going to wait a couple of days to make a real determination in my own mind. Anyway, I thought they came back with some determination. I don't know how angry they were, but they seemed to have a determination about them in practice. Up to that point in time, I thought maybe they were a little loose, which would concern me a little bit. Not take it as seriously as you would hope they would, but they practiced with a focus on what they were trying to do. So maybe it's just my inability to read them as well as I need to right now.
How far along is Alex Delton as a passer these days? You obviously get to see him a lot more in practice throwing the ball than we do in games. How would you assess his arm and when he's in those situations?
Well, Alex got a strong arm, and he's accurate. He throws the ball well. I think for anybody that plays that position, they wouldn't be in the position if they couldn't throw the ball. I think the important thing is being able to manage or go through the process, go through the progressions, and make the right decisions about where to go with the ball when you're throwing it. That's the biggest element of it, and he's gotten better and better and better at that. And it's not just this year, but I mean in his tenure here, because he's been around now for 3 years, so he's very intent about what he does. So those things that he recognizes that help in his development, he truly focuses on them and spends a good deal of time in his own self-preparation as well. So I don't worry about that part of it too much.
You mentioned that you thought he managed the game well against Texas. When you went back and rewatched that one, what were some of the decisions you liked that he made?
Well, I thought he made some good decisions about where to run the ball when he ran it. I thought he made some good decisions about where to throw it when he threw it. I thought, in regards to getting in and out of the right plays, I thought he made good decisions with 2 exceptions. But 2 out of how many is probably still gives him a pretty good score from that standpoint. So.
Coach, looking back at Texas again, were you maybe more encouraged that the offense played a little better, or more discouraged that the defense maybe took a step back?
Well, I was first and foremost. I mean, Texas is a very good football team, and as I've said, before, they, continue to make improvements, and that's expected. Not expected, but being with a new staff and a new system, and so we know they have, excellent young guys playing the game, and they've just gotten better and better. So I don't want to take anything away from, how well they played. But, obviously we left a lot on the table defensively, but by the same token, we did offensively as well. We had, got a few points on the board, but against a, very fine defense. But, we had the opportunities on offense to win it, and, didn't do what we needed to do. Penalties, I hate to say that there's one particular thing that, causes a loss, because there are so many different things that could have happened in single incidents that would have changed the outcome of the game, and in many cases changed it dramatically. But, just getting penalized, hurt us right at the end of the half, or at the end of the, hurt us at the end of the first half, hurt us right at the end of the regulation play, and hurt us again in the overtime. So, I always relate that to discipline or self-discipline, and so we need to get much better at that. But I was, there were some encouraging things on both sides of the ball. Defensively, as it was quarterback's ball game. Quarterback, beat us in that respect, both throwing and running the football, and. But you go back and look, they got 2 field goals in the second half. That's pretty good production for a half, but that's a half, and you got to play the entirety of the ball game, and just allowing them, some field position. I thought, you know, obviously the biggest concern would be in the passing game because they threw the ball for over 300 yards. But, you know, by the same token, it was just the inability to get the brakes put on. You know, you go back to between, you know, when they were scoring points, there was, after I think in the first 2 possessions, we held them 3 and out, which is excellent. And then we turned around and they had 5 consecutive drives, which totaled right at 350 yards, you know, of total offense. And that's where their points came, you know, as well, you know. But that's, you know, that we just were unable to get drive stopped, you know, and gave up too many first downs. I think they had 32 first downs in the ball game. So, you know, and they had 18 10-plus yard plays, so they were getting first downs in chunks, and that you know, that hurt us, gave them field position, and made a difference.
I also wanted to ask, in the first overtime, was there any consideration of going for 2 to end the game right there, or did you think being on the road to just tie it and get the ball right back?
You mean in the
First overtime?
in the first overtime in the score? Not, I mean, because they still had a chance to do whatever. I mean, so no, that wasn't anything I was interested in doing at the time.
Coach, the initial depth chart this year, I believe Alex Delton, Skylar Thompson, it was listed with an or between them. I guess, has Alex separated himself throughout the year, and how big is the gap between those 2?
Well, you know, I don't know about, you know, how big the gap is. You know, Alex is, you know, I mean, Jesse's number 1, Alex number 2, and Skylar is, you know, he's doing well, and we're giving him repetitions in practice. Not too many third-team guys get a lot of reps, but he gets, you know, a fair share of them, and he's doing well, throwing it well, running it well.
Coach, you always talk about keeping things between the white lines and not making one opponent bigger than the others. When you have a top 10 opponent coming, and maybe it's just human nature, but does it seem to especially capture the attention of coaches and players during the week?
Well, I think for players it truly does. I think from a coach's standpoint, I mean, you know, again, we say it so often, I mean, they're all good. You know, I don't care where they're ranked; they're all good. You know, people talk so much about the balance, and and you look across the league and see some of the things that are happening, and you know, it just makes sense that there's a lot of good football teams in this conference. So I don't, you know, I'd like to think that everybody would be highly motivated no matter who you were playing. And I think that's part of it. It's a good question, too, because I think that's, you know, part of it that I have concerned myself with during the course. I mean, there was a lot of, at the outset of the season, you know, I think our players had a little bit of a misperception about how good we were. And, I mean, there's probably too much outside influence in regards to, you know, a playoff team, a conference championship team, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, we've got to, you know, go back or get back to what our premise is, you know, and it's that 1-0 concept, and it's just about, it's about today. You know, let's do all we can do today. Let's be the best we can do today. Let's be better today than we were yesterday. You know, same old stuff. But nevertheless, I mean, it's valuable in our program. I don't know if everybody wants to be that way, but I know that's the way I'd like to see our program, and that's what's benefited us in, you know, many years in the past.
It's been a tough task for K-State as it's worked to try and defeat nationally ranked teams in recent years. Many games have been close. How much does that speak to the strength of the Big 12 annually, and what does it take exactly in your mind to get over the hump against a top 25 opponent?
Well, yeah, I don't know that I have an answer for that. I think again, I mean, the way I perceive it anyway, and the way I look at it is it's one game at a time. I mean, they're all top 25 teams to me. I don't care who you're playing. I mean, anybody, I mean, it's hard for people to understand that, but I guess that's what makes college football such a, a marvelous event. But I mean, you look at Iowa State and Oklahoma, I mean, you'd bet your wife and your children on the ball game, obviously, and, it just, anybody can beat anybody on any given day, and it's all about the same thing. It's about who prepares the best and who plays the best and coaches the best, and those, that'll never change, in my eyes anyway. So.
Coach, I'm curious as to your thoughts on Kenny Hill and the improvement he's made from when we saw him and what he did a year ago.
Well, he wasn't all that bad a year ago when he came into the ball game against us. And I can just remember in my mind, as soon as he came in the ball game, he scrambled for a first down, and that kind of set the tone, for him. But they talk about him being improved, and I certainly concur with that, and that's the way it should be. Young people should be getting better and better all the time. Even us old people should be getting better and better all the time. But he, he's throwing the ball well. I think he's 10th in the nation, completing 69% of his passes. He can bring the ball down when he wants to and needs to, and can run. And I mean, there's clips of him on tape that you watch him for a while, and you think he's got maybe a little bit above average speed, and then you see a couple of plays that he makes, and you think he's got excellent speed, which I think he really does. I don't know what his clock time is, but he can run. So. He's, he becomes a nemesis to us because just coming off this past ball game, as I said, you've got a quarterback that gets over 400 yards collectively against us. So, quarterback was an issue, and you've got a young guy that has the same capabilities as the youngster we just played against. So, he's doing well.
Coach, I'd also ask you about their defense. Is it pretty typical of what they normally do?
Gary's got an awful lot of things that, that they do. They're playing a little bit different this year than they did against us last year. But, I think, he's a smart man. They're smart coaches down there, and they will, they'll do what they need to do in order to do what they need to do to defend us as well as they can. And I think. He played us a certain way last year. He hasn't played, as much of some of those schemes this year as he did last year. But, that doesn't mean that they won't. So, I mean, it's same week in and week out. You'd better be prepared for everything they've got in the tank. And, and if you're not, then whatever it is you don't prepare for, you're probably going to see.
Coach, when you went back and looked at Dalton Schoen's 82-yard touchdown, what did you see through your eyes, and how would you grade the execution and the effort on that play?
Well, I mean, it was wide open, and the catch was, it's an easy ball to catch. If there are any easy balls to catch, I don't know that there are, but nevertheless, it was right there, and he caught it. I'd been disappointed if he didn't. What really stood out to me, was the fact that, as I said to him, I mean, he's slower than I am. And the youngster that was chasing him, runs faster than most players we have. And when he caught the ball, there was about 5-yard separation, and when he crossed the goal line, there was about 5-yard separation. In other words, the youngster didn't, even though he was faster youngster, he didn't close on him, and that's just heart. That's want to, so to speak. That's what I took away from the play and what I appreciated about it so much.
Right now, he leads the team in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. I see. I know you're going to say that nothing surprises you, but where he's at right now, how much better can Dalton Schoen become?
Well, I think he can continue to become better. I mean, I don't put any limits on how good someone can perform. But the fact that he's the leading receiver in terms of touchdowns just tells me, we need to get more guys actively involved and getting the ball in the end zone. And when you go back and look, I think we're 10th in the conference in passing touchdowns. So we haven't been, effective in that now early in the season. But nevertheless, that's still the case, which is alarming to a certain degree.
Coach, you singled out Iowa State's win over Oklahoma, and you also cited the balance in the league. Do you feel the balance in the league is almost a detriment to the league itself for its hope to place eventually a team in the college football playoff?
Well, I don't want to, necessarily go there. I think it's great to have great competition, and every school. I don't want to wish on anybody that they're a bad football program or a bad football team. However it's perceived nationally is that's just the way it is. Doesn't bother me one way or the other. I think my only thoughts have always been the same. I think even if you have that great balance and you have so many quality football teams and programs, we are so much better served to have those two divisions and be able to play a championship game. When we had that, we had the capacity. You didn't play everybody, so that solves a little bit of the problem, and until the championship game anyway. So anyway, I don't want to get into that, but that's I just think we're a balanced league and made up of a lot of very fine football teams.
As a follow-up to that, though, you're trying to beat the team this week that, at this point anyway, represents the Big 12's best shot at getting into the college football playoff. Is that almost counterproductive to the league?
Well, I wouldn't say that. Everybody's got to play somebody. You've got to line up and play the game, and people want to see. It's a spectator sport, so the spectators want to see competitive games, and I can appreciate that part of it. Yeah.
Coach, I have two questions on Alex. One, did you guys intend to play him on Saturday night, or did you get put in the game because of circumstances?
I intend to play him every game. Sometimes what I intend to do and what we end up doing is not always one and the same. But we'd like for him to play all the time.
And then, from an outside perspective, playing in front of 90,000 people in his first real lengthy snaps, he came off awfully poised to me. Is that accurate? And is that who he's always been since he got to the program?
Well, as I said, he's a very focused young guy, and you want all your people, not just your quarterbacks, but everybody to, as like what was mentioned a moment ago. It's just about keeping the game between the white lines. All the fields are the same. Our field is the same as University of Texas, and it's the same as TCU's, and so on down the road. And if you can just keep your mindset within the white lines, as I say anyway, it's on the field, and that's what you're accustomed to doing. That's what you do every single day. If you make it different just because there's some people in the stands, and then you're probably out of context with what you're attempting to do, and that creates some problems. But he did anyway. The bottom line is, he stays focused in practice, and he listens, to what you say, and pays attention to the directions, and stays focused on the task at hand for him and for his teammates, for his offense. So I appreciate that.
Coach, what was your assessment of the defensive line and the pass rush in general on Saturday?
Well, our defensive line, was, played reasonably well. I don't think they were the cause necessarily of some of the issues that we had. Got caught in, a little bit of a dilemma because of the quarterback bringing the ball down all the time, and so that tempers pass rush, depending on what you're doing. But in many cases, it tempers your pass rush, and it certainly did from time to time on Saturday. But overall, they've played well.
And also, Creemore leaving the game on Saturday, do you anticipate him being available this week?
It doesn't appear that he will.
Coach, I was curious, Big 12 I was wondering about Darius Anderson, Kyle Higgs, and what makes them so effective running the ball this season?
Well, I think you mentioned, a couple of the reasons to begin with. I mean, they have good depth at the running back spot. Anderson has moved into probably become, a very prolific runner. He's a sub 4.4 guy, so he's got a lot of speed. He's got good change of direction. He makes a lot of people miss. They're vastly improved up front. My hat goes off to their offensive line coach. They've gotten better and better in the offensive line and playing with a lot of the same people, and that obviously makes a big difference in the running game as well.
How would you say Jesse's been coming along since the game?
He's coming along fine, doing everything we ask.
Okay. With Byron Pringle, he obviously had the really big game to start the season, been much quieter since. What's been missing there, and what do you think he needs to do to get going?
Well, I think he's moving in the right direction. Sometimes, sometimes you just don't get the ball. And I mean, if you're getting the ball and you're doing all you can with it, then the number of times is not as significant as how well you're doing when you have it in your hands, or how well you're blocking and all those things. So there's a lot of things that he's doing quite well. He's just not. I mean, you're saying he's been quiet. That I interpret that to mean that you look at the number of passes that he's caught. And receivers do a lot of things other than just catch balls. But I also concur. He's pretty good with the ball in his hands, and but we've got some other guys that provided we catch the ball, that have the ability to move around with the ball. So and it just kind of depends. We can't we can't say we're definitely going to get the ball to you. You don't know how the defense is going to play and how they're going to, what they're going to take away or who they're going to take away, and they can take away anybody or anyone they want to. Not that necessarily that's been the case with him, but we'd certainly like to see him get the ball better. But I'd like to see all of them get the ball better and more frequently. Our numbers have just dropped off in the last 2 or 3 ball games considerably throwing the ball. I mean, we're way down in the conference in regards to throwing it. Now we're playing in a conference that likes to throw it around, but by the same token, I mean, just even in the efficiency of it, we're down far lower than what I would have anticipated, what I hoped for anyway. So it's collective. It's a lot of things. It's not just him.
Coach, how different are the responsibilities of the nickelback spot versus a more traditional corner? And the players you have in the spots, do you see them as really interchangeable, or are those two really defined roles?
Well, the nickel spot, so to speak, is basically a linebacker position. And, so sometimes you see a nickel in the ball game for us or anybody else, and sometimes you don't, and it kind of depends on how the opponent subs, how they substitute, and what they put on the field, and how many tight ends and backs they have in the game versus how many wide receivers they have. Nickel backs are, in this day and age where people spread you out with 4 wide receivers and still run the ball, you've got to be able to defend 4 wide receivers with more than 4 guys, so you need that nickel there. But you also, it can put you a gap short in the box, so he becomes a two-way player. He becomes a guy that has to be prominent, and everybody's a two-way player, but he has to be prominent in both the pass defense as well as run defense. And so it takes somebody that makes good decisions, can process information quickly and react quickly. And so it's not an easy position. I mean, it's probably the hardest position to play on defense.
Any other questions?
Kind of piggybacking off of what Kellis asked, will Jesse be 100% this week? And at what point is a healthy Alex Delton a better option than a hurt Jesse Hurts?
Well, I don't know if Jesse will be 100% or not. That you ask me on Saturday, and I'll give you a better idea when he tells me. And I don't know what the other question was, but it doesn't sound like one I even want to consider. Okay.
Gary Patterson's career, he has a fairly interesting stat in that whatever his last 2 times he's suffered a losing season at TCU, they bounced back and had some of their best seasons. What does that signal to you about them and to him that he can get things corrected like that?
Well, I think Gary is a magnificent coach. I think he's he's a very competitive individual. I think he is able to get the message across. And even Gary will tell you that it's that underdog environment that he likes to be in. And so if it's not there, he tries to create it, for sure. And he's got young guys that respond to that, quite obviously. I think part of it is you go back and look. From this year to last year, part of it is the fact that he's got a lot of very talented players that return from last year's team, and you go back and whatever it was, 12 or something like that. It's a similar situation, and he returned a lot of good players. So, but just returning good players doesn't make it happen. There's a lot of other things that just the dynamics of coaches and players, and what you put on the field, and how well you're able to do it every single week. But he gives them great guidance, I think.
Coach, this may be, I don't know, it's kind of a general question, but you've done this for so long and seen so many offenses. From your perspective, what is the most difficult pass to defend in the game?
Well, I think probably the hardest, the hardest to defend is the guy that's wide open. So that's, but probably the most difficult is just when they haul off and throw those long, deep balls down there and they get you one-on-one. And I say it's more difficult because, the rules, and rightfully so, the rules are right, but it's the pass interference calls that take place, that it is strictly a jump ball. Because it's that, that concept that the defense has every bit as much a right, for the ball as the offense does, makes it, very difficult to both defend, but it makes, it also can be very difficult for wide receiver. But the defensive guy has to stay off of that wide receiver. He's got to let him, basically he has to let him touch the ball before anything can take place. You all know the rules. I don't mean to go over that, but so it's almost like he's just running down there, and it's the throw and the catch, and if the quarterback can get it there and he can get his hands on it, and then the chances for the catch are pretty high. And defensively, the timing has to be so great, that you've got to be able to come down on the ball at the instant that it hits somebody's hands. And if you do it a tenth of a second early, you're subject to the pass interference call. So, say that's probably as hard as anything.
Coach, with that in mind, Texas went for that on the very first snap of the game. Did DJ Reed play that absolutely perfectly? And then, as the game advanced, he did strip the ball after it hit the receiver's hands. How good was he against that? Well,
DJ has played well, throughout the course of the year. And the one on the very first snap of the ball game, really the youngster got behind him, and had him beat, but he recovered well. DJ runs pretty well. He recovered, and he's such a competitive young guy that it was his competitive spirit as much as anything that allowed him to get up, and the timing was absolutely perfect, in regards to being able to knock the ball down out of the youngster's hands. So it's a good play.